We certainly did as we celebrated and fellowshiped on yesterday. Being rich is not what you have, it's what you give. One verse today, Proverbs 13:22. Whatever version you choose to read it in, a good man, a good person, good people leave inheritance to their children and grandchildren. But the sinner's wealth passes to the godly. For just a few moments, as a summary to this video that you've seen, what my daddy left me. What my daddy left me. Well, at 10:16 p.m. last night, when I left Men's Fellowship, Bethel House board meeting, I went home and I read and wrote for 9 hours. I didn't even realize the time had passed. So about 10:16 p.m. I said, well, let me just check the national debt clock. See what y'all's president is doing. At 10:16 p.m., I showed the debt clock at the board meeting yesterday. They called it up, and they said, Reverend, how you look at this thing because it's constantly moving? I said, yeah, you just kind of flip and try to write the numbers down and catch the time on your computer. That's the only way you can freeze it because it's constantly moving. 10:16 p.m., approximately, our debt was $19,947,532,973,802. Since there was a treasury auction of 10-year notes this week, our national debt went up by $18 billion just this week. Remember last week it was $5 billion. In the course of preparing Wednesday's Bible study, I see myself free. I was looking through various graphics and I came up with this graphic, and it was a quote from Donald Trump when he was on the campaign trail, and for all the life of me I couldn't remember it, and so I said I made a mental note that I would go back and research the quote to ensure its accuracy, and sure enough, on June 16th, 2016, Donald Trump is quoted as saying, quote, I'm the king of debt. I'm great with debt. Nobody knows debt better than me. End of quote. Trump told Norah O'Donnell in an interview that aired on CBS This Morning show. Quote, I've made a fortune by using debt, and if things don't work out, I renegotiate the debt. I mean, that's a smart thing, not a stupid thing. End of quote. O'Donnell followed up with the question, quote, how do you renegotiate debt? End of quote. Donald Trump's response, quote, you go back and you say, hey, guess what? The economy crashed. I'm going to give you back half. End of quote. Needless to say, the Clinton campaign certainly responded at the statement, realizing that about 35 to 40% of our national debt is held by foreign entities. And the thought that we would not pay them back would cause the economy havoc. Well, I don't know what Donald Trump will leave the next president, or what financial condition this country will be in 2020. But I do know that someone's going to have to pay that debt at some point. And at this rate, he will leave this country more in debt and with less credibility in the world than we've ever experienced in our short national history. But today I do have some good news. That God has determined through his own counsel to bless those who have adhered to his principles and follow his instructions and obey his commands. Am I in the right house this morning? To refresh your mind on our theme text this month, Deuteronomy 28 verses 12 and 13 in the New Living Translation says this: the Lord will open the windows of heaven. I don't care what's going on in Washington. The storehouse of his bounty, which is not confined to Wall Street, to send rain on your land in season, and to bless all the work of your hands. You will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. The Lord will make you the head, not the tail, if you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day, and carefully follow them. You will always be at the top and never at the bottom. If there's nothing else you don't remember from this month, just remember God wants me to be on top and never at the bottom. Do I have any witnesses here this morning? God wants you on top. But to get you there, he's already set you up for a blessing. Now all you have to do is walk in his ways and harvest what the ancestors have labored, prayed, suffered, and sacrificed for. We are in the midst of what will become the greatest receipt of an inheritance and a transfer of wealth that will far outweigh the temporal losses we've endured because of the spiritual fortitude and power of our ancestors. The ancestors who took pennies and built schools, Morgan State, who built schools, Prairie View, who built schools, Wilberforce and Morris Brown. The ancestors who took pennies and built churches, colleges, and universities. The ancestors who took tribal and plantation skills. Oh yeah, even though I was in slavery, I learned how to run a business. Hello, somebody. Yeah, there were some things that we walked out of slavery understanding how to deal with. We took tribal and plantation skills and built businesses across this country that reached around the world. The ancestors who built 600 thriving businesses in Tulsa, Oklahoma, including 21 churches, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, a hospital, a bank, a post office, libraries, schools, law offices, and a half dozen private airplanes, and even a bus system at the turn of the 20th century. 1910 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a time when the entire state of Oklahoma had only 2 airports, but 6 black folks owned their own planes. It was a very fascinating community. We've come to call it Black Wall Street, Little Africa, and even mini Beverly Hills. Well, you know the story. It was destroyed from the air and the land by the Ku Klux Klan, working in consort with ranking city officials and many other sympathizers. 3,000 African Americans on June 21st, 1921, June 1st, 1921, 3,000 African Americans were killed, but the soul of our ancestors imparts to our generations that enduring inheritance. You tore it down, but what's in us to build it is still in us. Oh, I wish I had somebody up in here. When I look back at Wall Street, they built all of it without a J.P. Morgan Chase. They built it without a Wells Fargo. They built it without a Capital One, without a Bank of America. They didn't have access to GMAC Finance. They didn't have Toyota Finance. They didn't have Ford Motor Credit. They didn't need check cashing and payday loans that charged them 122% interest. In their community, their dollar circulated 36 to 100 times before it even left their community. Now our dollar doesn't even stay in the hood 15 minutes. As far as resources in that community, in Little Africa, they had PhDs, black attorneys, doctors. One doctor was Dr. Berry, who owned the bus system, and his average income in 1910 was $500 a day. And during that era, black physicians owned medical schools. That was then. Racial Wealth Divide Initiative in 2016 quotes this interesting statistic, and more information on that is available in our own UEDC. The billionaires of the Forbes 400, which include only 2 blacks and 5 Latinos, they own more than the entire black population of the United States, plus 1/3 of the Latino population combined. 400 people own more wealth than all the black population and 1/3 of the Latino population combined. 60 million people. $2.1 trillion, while 400 people have $2.34 trillion. But I have some good news. I have some good news. Our fathers, the ancestors, have left us an inheritance that will enable us to realize their hopes and dreams for our lives and our generations. And it's sitting right in this room today. They're watching by streaming right now. I have some more good news. You want the good news? What God placed in our ancestors has passed down to us. And now the stage is set for us to realize what God has ordained and destined. God wants you on top. Two realities in the text. Can we walk through them together on this Father's Day? Couple of realities. The texts in Proverbs, and Proverbs are written as combined or what they call complex sentence, taking two phrases, independent clauses, and combining them. So the first reality of the text is good people leaving inheritances to their grandchildren. That's the first reality. The second reality, but the sinner's wealth passes to the godly. That's the second reality. Let's start with the first reality and unpack that for just a few moments. Is that all right with you? What does a good man leave? What does a good man do to leave to his children and his grandchildren? What do we have sitting here today that we've inherited from our fathers and our grandfathers that will help us in our present and to build a greater future? What do we have? Well, a good man, number one, thinks generationally and leaves a sense of awareness. Thinks generationally and leaves a sense of awareness. You saw it in the example of the video. A good man realizes that his footsteps will mark the way for those who follow him. Now, some of us realize it a little sooner than others, but at some point we realize as we move along that we do want better for those who come behind us. I never forget that. I've shared it on last Sunday that Brother Edmund shared with me the story of his grandfather. His grandfather worked his own land, produced his own food, and provided for his family's needs, and never borrowed a single dime. Let me say that one more time. He owned his own land, produced his own food, provided for his family's needs, and didn't borrow it a single dime. He passed down the inheritance, watch this, of being an owner and a producer. Not a customer and a consumer. An owner and a producer. No debt. When we look at our fathers, many of them worked hard not for themselves, but for us and our future. And in their generations, if they looked at a snapshot of us over the last 50 years, many of them would look and say, well, how you get in so much debt? When we had not even a tenth of what you have, and we were able to do what we did and didn't have access like you have it. He thinks generationally and leaves a sense of awareness. The second thing, he labors chronologically and leaves a sense of service. Let me say that one more time. He labors chronologically. And what I mean by that is there are two considerations for time that we understand. There is chronos, which is where we get clocks and chronology from. That is man's time. Then there is kairos, which is God's time. And since God is in eternity, he doesn't bother about a clock ticking. He doesn't bother about the grains of sand going through an hourglass. God moves in his own time. And so when God grants us the gift of time, it is what we make of it. We can only labor in the season we've been given. With the time we've been given, we have to serve this present age. Our fathers took what they were given and made the best they could. Yeah, some made a little better than others. Some had different characteristics, but the reality is we are able to sit here today because of our fathers and our mothers. Acts 13, 36, 37, Paul was preaching in Antioch. And he was talking about their great ancestor, King David. He said, now when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. He was buried with his ancestors and his body decayed. But the one whom God raised from the dead did not see decay. That is the Son of David, who is Christ. Speaking of David, it is estimated in some places that he left Solomon about $2 billion in gold to build the temple in Jerusalem. The wealth was unequivocal in that day and certainly astronomical in this day. Fathers taught us the value of time. Work with the time that the Lord has given you. Some of them learned it early on, some of it didn't learn till late, and they had to make up time for lost time. But they learned to labor chronologically with a sense of service. If I can just help somebody as I pass along, then hopefully my living will not be in vain. In the video, you saw the example of a life of service with a father just working even in his retired years, just be able to give to a little orphan home. Not only did they labor chronologically, not only did they think generationally, but when they left, they were viewed gloriously. They left a sense of sacrifice. Yeah. Proverbs 17:6 says this: children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children are their fathers. That word glory means hope and expectation. And there's something about dad. We brothers, we know we are, many of us are mama's boys. We love the nurturing, all that, but it was just something about daddy's presence. And even in a case where our fathers were not present, in the power of our social community, God provided with us father figures. That's why the church is such an important gathering place for spiritual insight and refreshing, and for fellowshipping, and for young men and young women to be nurtured and to receive the strength of fathers and men in the life of the house of God. They're viewed gloriously now. They're not all perfect, but it's how you look at them. June 18th, 1995, my father departed this world. I was preaching at Fountain Chapel, AME Church in Tallahassee, Florida, and the message was from this text, Proverbs 17:6, some under glory in. You know, for a kid growing up, the glory of children is their father. Daddies can do anything. And even if there is a disconnect, God provides men in our lives to show us that anything is possible. We have mentoring programs in this church that mentor young men to help them to understand your daddy may not be in the house for whatever reason, but life is possible. And something I've come to learn is that glory is in the eyes of the beholder. Everybody sees their daddy differently. And when you look at your father, what do you see? If your father is gone and you think about what was in him that was glorious, what do you behold? Whatever you see in him is in you. You see, our fathers were just like us. They were human, prone to error, sinful, yet trying to be the best that they could be given the circumstances that they were dealt. Can you see their glory even when you know their story? Papa was a rolling stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when he died, I can't do the high part today. All he left me was alone. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. The fact that you're singing this song means there was something of value that he left. Then what they are, which is in you, can either help you or bind you. It's your choice on how you view it. can I wasn't going to go here, but let me elaborate on this so you can get that out, end up. My grandfather, my father's father, and my grandmother had my father out of wedlock. And back in 1932, that was a hard thing in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Steel town, labor town. And so my great-grandmother, my father's grandmother, said, I'll take him and raise him. I'm so glad for Beatrice Campbell. I'm really glad for Beatrice Campbell. When I saw I had my dad's birth certificate, I'm really glad for Beatrice Campbell, who changed his name. Brothers who were with me yesterday, y'all feel me? Who changed his name? Because the name I have is his name. But my great-grandmother named him. I'm going to leave that where it lies. And so in my early childhood years, and as I got into teen years, my dad was always going to church meetings. And so he didn't know how to make your son's football games and all those kind of things. And so as a young adult, I was very resentful until I began to look back at his story and realize that Dad may not have known how to do those things because he didn't have a father to do that for him. And his grandmother, my great-grandmother, took him to church 24/7. So he might not have known how to go to a football game, but he sure knew how to say, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. And the thing about my dad that was so amazing is that when it came to holiday season, there was no better celebrator or celebrant than my father. Starting with Thanksgiving, oh my God, the spirit and energy he created in the house. And Lord, come Christmas time, when we had to go get that blue spruce pine, and no matter what low parsonage we lived in, the tree was always bigger, and we had to yank it in and yank it out, saw it down and put it up, and he'd put on Christmas albums, and Christmas was a wonderful time. And I realized something as a young adult, that he had worked through the deficits that had been created in his own life and was trying to make it up to the next generation. So I had to look back and salute and say, good job, Dad. And celebrate what he was in my life. Human, prone to error. So how do you deal with that, Reverend? Acknowledge the deficits. Fill in the gaps. Forgive the mistakes. Understand the shortcomings. And don't repeat the problem cycle. Walk in the generational qualities. Receive the good. Build your present and deliver a better future and see the glory in the story. Well, our fathers left us whatever we are and have today, and what we do with it will determine how we value them and the deposit they made in our lives. The text notes that good people leave something. Whatever our dad has left us, we ought to be thankful that we're here today to be able to thank God for it. They think generationally, left a sense of awareness. They labor chronologically, they left a sense of service. They're viewed gloriously, they leave a sense of sacrifice. But there's some more good news in the text. In that B portion of the text, there's some more good news. You see, one is specifically about a good man, and that's that first part of that independent clause. But then I guess as Solomon is penning this, he begins to realize that his outlook in life, that sometimes good men don't get a chance to do everything for their generations that they want to do. Sometimes good men are dealt difficult times that limit their ability to leave a lasting legacy. Sometimes good men die early. They die early serving their country. They die early of prostate cancer. They die early being gunned down in the streets of Baltimore by policemen. They die early in Bible studies on a Wednesday night at Charleston, South Carolina. They die early. And while we wrestle with the eternal implications of losing good men too early, the son of David, Solomon, closes the loop of our concerns in the text. He said, in case your daddy didn't leave you all he wanted to leave you, in case your daddy didn't get a chance to give you all he wanted to give you, in case your daddy was taken away too early, God has a remedy. When good men are not able to do for their children as they want to do, in case daddy didn't get it into your hand, God's got a wealth transfer system. And the end portion of the text said the sinner's wealth is laid up for the godly. And so whatever you take from the generations that have come before you, when you walk in the way of the Lord, no matter what you don't have in your hand, God says you take the qualities from those who have labored before you. Don't worry about what's in your hand, because I got a transfer I'm about to make. Now, there are some sinners who are grabbing everything, and I'm going to take it from them and give it to you. No good thing will I withhold to those who walk upright. My daddy left me. He left me with a legacy. He left us with an opportunity. Shall we stand in the presence of God today? What daddy left me. Pray that you have been blessed in this word today. There may be somebody here who needs to be saved. You need a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. Or you may need a church home. You say, hey, I'd love to join the Union Bethel Church.